She had 7 children, and then she told her husband she was done having more. That single sentence, spoken quietly inside an Amish home, carries a weight most of us will never fully understand. The community around her had expectations rooted in faith, tradition, and a way of life stretching back centuries. But she had reached a limit that no church rule could measure and no bishop could see. What happens next inside that marriage, that family, and that community is far more complicated than anyone outside ever imagines. She isn't a symbol or a cautionary tale. She's a woman who cooked breakfast that morning, who knows every creak in her farmhouse floor. Her body had carried life 7 times, and somewhere between the prayers and the planting seasons, she arrived at a decision that her world was not built to hold. Have you ever made a choice that your entire community considered a question of faith, not just a personal matter? The Amish world she lives in doesn't separate those two things, and that's exactly why her quiet words landed like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples don't stop at her kitchen door. Children aren't simply a blessing in Amish life. They're the living proof that a family is doing what God asked. Most Amish communities draw their theology of family from Genesis, where the command to be fruitful and multiply isn't treated as metaphor or suggestion. A large household signals faithfulness, and a woman's fertility is woven into her identity in ways that go far deeper than personal preference. The average Amish woman bears between 5 and 7 children, and in the most conservative communities, that number climbs higher still. Raising those children inside the faith is how the community sustains itself. There's no missionary work, no recruiting from outside. Every birth is, in a very real sense, a vote for the community's survival. But here is where the picture becomes more complicated than most outsiders expect. The Amish are not one church. They're hundreds of separate communities, each governed by its own bishop and its own ordnung, the unwritten code of conduct that shapes daily life. A woman in a liberal New Order congregation may face quiet conversation. A woman in a strict Old Order district may face something far more serious. The consequences of her decision don't live in Scripture alone. They live in the specific man who holds authority over her community. And that uncertainty is what makes her situation so difficult to predict. The first person who feels the weight of her decision isn't a bishop or an elder. It's the man sleeping beside her. A husband raised inside the same faith carries the same theology in his bones, and her words land differently when they touch something he's always assumed was settled. Some husbands listen with a quiet that feels like understanding, and some listen with a quiet that feels like something closing. Her parents and his parents grew up watching large families treated as evidence of faithfulness, so her choice reads to them as a statement about values they still hold. Nobody may say anything directly. That's not always how Amish communities work. But she'll feel the shift in a conversation that ends a little sooner, or an invitation that doesn't come. The community doesn't need to hold a meeting to make its feelings known. And yet not every household around her responds the same way, because she's surrounded by people, not a single voice, and people are complicated. The question she's living inside now isn't whether she'll be judged. It's by whom and how quietly. Whatever she decides, she carries it largely alone, inside a community built on shared answers. Her husband may grieve the decision, or quietly accept it, or never fully understand what it cost her to reach it. The marriage doesn't break on a single moment. It shifts slowly, under the weight of what goes unspoken. She may find a kind of peace in her choice and still feel the pull of guilt every time the church speaks of fruitfulness as obedience. What she's navigating isn't just a question of children. It's a question of who she is allowed to be inside a life she was raised to love. Some women find quiet allies, a mother-in-law who understands, a bishop who shows mercy, a husband who chooses her over doctrine. Others find only the silence of a community that has no language for her need. The Amish world asks its members to surrender the self for something larger, and most do willingly for most of their lives. But a woman standing at her own limit asks a question that no community can fully answer for her.